Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to talk about public goods, another type of market failure. So back in Unit 9, we briefly touched upon public goods when we talked about the circular flow model and how it's the government that provides public goods. And so I just want to revisit the definition of a public good. So a public good is a good that is, one, non-excludable. So that means non-paying customers cannot be prevented from consuming the good. And that actually creates a lot of problems, as we're going to see in a second. So basically, I cannot stop a customer from consuming it if they're not paying it. Nobody can, right? And so you can see the examples at the bottom of a public good. Firework displays have are a great example of this because, if I don't want to pay for a fireworks display, I'll just drive far enough away to still see the fireworks without going into the area in which I'd have to pay for them. They're also non-rival, which means consumption of the good by any one person does not reduce the availability of the good to other people, right? I can consume it at the same time you're consuming it, and it doesn't diminish it for either of us. So again, fireworks displays are a great example of this, right? I can look at the fireworks, you can look at the fireworks, and we both have the same enjoyable experience. And so that's the idea of a public good. The opposite of a public good, just so you know, is what we would call a private good. So private good is both excludable and rival, meaning that I can stop you from consuming it if you don't pay, and if I use it, you can't be using it simultaneously. An example of this might be like an ice cream cone. If I buy an ice cream cone, you can't buy the same cone, and if you don't pay, you don't get the cone. So that's the idea of a private good. Public goods are pretty tricky for this reason known as the free rider problem. Because it is virtually impossible to exclude individuals who value public goods but do not pay for them, which we call free riders, public goods tend to be underproduced by private firms. In other words, firms don't really have an incentive to produce public goods because if you can't consistently charge people for it, you're not going to make a profit, right? Like if I was a fireworks display company, I would not be very successful, right? Because it's hard to charge people for something that they can just drive far enough away from and still see it, right? So really the free rider problem comes out of the fact that public goods are non-excludable. In other words, you can't prevent people from consuming it if they haven't paid for it. So the example I give here is people who watch a street performer and don't pay, right? My family likes to take a lot of trips to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and as you walk down the main strip there in Gatlinburg, you see a lot of street performers from time to time. And some people pay and some people don't, right? Some people listen to music, some people don't. And so that's the free rider problem, right? And it makes it very, very hard for those street performers to make a living, just as it's hard for a fireworks display company to make a profit when they're selling a public good. And so how do we solve this free rider problem? And the best we can do is really put it in the government's hands to do one of two things. Either you can find new ways to punish free riders, right? Maybe you could tax them, something like that. That makes it harder for people just to free ride off those goods. Or you could use those tax dollars to provide the good themselves. So for example, public schools, that's how we get the name public schools, are a public good. And so they're provided by the government, which is much better than firms doing it because governments don't have the profit motive that private firms do. And so they can provide the good without being worried about who's paying and who's not because they're doing it themselves. And again, this does require some level of taxation, and there's a debate over, how much or how many different public goods should the government be providing, and would it be better in private hands? And so And education is a great example of this in terms of, how much of education should be privatized? Should there be charter schools? How is it different than public schools? What's the best outcome there? So there's a lot of debate over who should be providing public goods. But in general, the government can provide them without having to worry about that profit motive. So that's all for this video on public goods. Until next time, have a great day.